Hey guys, this is Sam, time for another Monday Musing. Now, warning before we begin, this is always a heated discussion. There are very passionate people on both sides of the argument, and yeah, I'm probably gonna upset some people with this. Now, you know the format is just me talking off the cuff, unscripted, to my camera, and this week we are talking about fan art, and I can already tell that I'm going to regret this. So, full disclosure before we begin, I have sold fan art at conventions before, as recently as 2 years ago. And as you know, I do the Fan Art Friday videos on this channel every Friday, so there's those two things to consider. I do not currently sell fan art, though I do still create fan art, so we'll get into why that is later on. To begin with, let's just talk about some of the pros of fan art, some of the advantages to doing fan art. So, for me personally, doing fan art is a great way to draw characters and environments that usually, you wouldn't do. I think we're all guilty of getting into ruts where we draw, the same type of people or the same posers and that kind of thing. Especially if you're trying to imitate another artist's style, it's very good to see the differences between how you do things and how they do things, and actually if there's any sort of techniques or changes that you could borrow or you could, take away from that. It's also fantastic just for showing your love and appreciation of a franchise, sort of similar to cosplay in that regard. A way of sort of saying, hey, this series or this character, really got to me, I quite liked them, they were important to me, it's sort of a thank you in a way. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, all that. So I still do fan art for all of those reasons. However, I just don't sell it anymore. So the main one is legality. And I'm not a lawyer, but I will go into my limited, and I want to repeat that, limited understanding on the subject matter. I'll also be talking primarily about UK law, because that's where I live. I'm not based in the US, therefore, it's kind of hard to talk about laws for a country I'm not in. And even then, the US is like different laws by different states and all sorts of nasty stuff. I also appreciate that for a lot of this stuff, there isn't exactly a lot of legal precedent, so that makes it quite tricky as well. This is one, again, where I do have a couple of facts and figures open in front of me this time, just to make sure that I don't misquote anything or anything like that. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. I think this is one that you guys will definitely have some thoughts on too. So, as always, I'm open to healthy debate and discussion. What I don't want to see, and it comes up a lot with this topic, is people bashing each other or having a go at each other. That's not on. So, one of the things that made me stop selling fan art was actually when conventions changed their attitudes towards fan art. So, MCM Comic-Con, if you're in the Comic Village, you are not supposed to be selling fan art. It's in the rules, it's there when you sign up. You then get an email confirming, it's in like big red capital letters on that. You then get another email closer to the time saying, look, you're not supposed to have fan art. Supposedly, if you've got fan art on the day and they see you with it, then you will be asked to leave the event or pay the difference between, essentially, a Comic Village table is subsidized, it's much cheaper than a dealer's table. So you'll either be asked to pay the difference between the Comic Village table and the dealer's table, or you'll be asked to leave. It's, one of two choices. Now, for me, that's very cut and dry. Their show, their rules. It's sort of like, if someone tells me, oh, take your shoes off when you come in, when I go round their house, don't care about my views on whether I keep my shoes on or not, I take my shoes off. It's their house, it's polite, it's respectful. I don't think anyone can claim ignorance of the rules. You certainly get told about it enough times when you sign up for an MCM. So I think, regardless of your views of the wider issue, taking fan art to an MCM is disrespectful because it basically flies in the face of not only the house rules, but also everyone there who has abided by the rules. Everyone else who's playing ball, everyone else who's gone, okay, you know what, even if I have fan art that I usually sell, I'm going to leave it at home because this convention's rules are no fan art. Likewise, after my involvement with Western Supersonic, I got invited to Summer of Sonic. However, Sega did say no fan art, and I declined that offer primarily because when I did Western Supersonic, the main thing that sold was fan art. You know, there were Sonic fans who were buying Sonic-related stuff. My original stuff didn't really sell to that crowd, and that's fine, that's perfectly understandable. So, those two things, there's also something that a fellow creator, Matt Dyson Bird, said to me, wherein he was saying from a morality point of view, if you look at my characters, you know, you've got Joe Cape, Clarice Muston, so on and so forth. If I saw someone selling prints of them without any permission or anything from me, without any sort of royalties or anything like that to me, would I be annoyed or upset by that? And if I'm honest, yes, I would be. I would find that highly disrespectful. Like, they didn't come up with those characters or that world. They have, you know, no place profiting from any popularity or fan base that I've built up. At the moment, admittedly, there's not much of a fan base for either, because I'm still relatively... I don't know, despite doing this for a while, I still feel like I don't have much presence or clout within the small press community, but that's a whole different issue, and I do not want to go off on a tangent, especially with a topic as serious as this one. There was also, on the morality side of things, how I felt about selling fan art. And again, this is not to project on anyone else or tell you that what you're doing is wrong. For me personally, if I sold, say, an Iron Man print, or a Pokemon print, or a Sonic the Hedgehog print, or a Kingdom Hearts print, I always had the question in the back of my head of, are they buying this because they like my work, or are they buying this because, hey, it's Pikachu, and they know Pikachu, and that's a safe option? I always felt a lot better when someone bought my original work, because that's 100% me. You know, they're buying that because they like my stuff. And I got so much more satisfaction on original stuff sales versus fan art that I cut the fan art out. What I also found, for me personally, is that when I had a mix of original stuff and fan art stuff, someone who was thinking about the original stuff would end up going with the safe backup option of the fan art, and the original stuff didn't really sell all that well. Now that fan art is not on the table and it's not an option, they go for the original work every time, because of course they do. But that original work actually sells a lot better than it ever did when fan art was on the table. So the sales figures for my own comics and my own prints have increased since removing fan art from the equation. Now again, I can only speak for my personal experience there. That's certainly the way it worked for me. In terms of, you know, other factors outside of that, I mean, that there was enough reason, I think, for me to give up fan art. And giving up fan art commercially, you know, may or may not be the right decision for you. I know there are several people who do fan art very well. I know there are several companies that embrace fan art and, you know, are quite happy for it, and creators have come out on an individual basis and said, this is fine, that's not fine, so on and so forth. So I get that it, you know, there are different tolerances based on different companies, that some willingly turn a blind eye to it, some actively encourage it, and others will come down on your ass and send you cease and desist and all the rest of it. Like, do not do Nintendo stuff, for example. Do not do Disney-owned stuff, so, like, Marvel is then immediately out, because they're reportedly horrendous for it. Now, in terms of legalities, it gets really weird, because to my knowledge, and I'm going to stress that again, because I'll admit I can be, you know, at times ignorant or not have the full story, there isn't really a legal precedent, you know. I don't think any fan artist has ever been taken to court or anything like that. And bearing in mind, we've had fan artists like Sakimi-chan, I think I'm pronouncing that right, that her Patreon at one point was at something like $9,000, $10,000, something ridiculous like that, per month, and she does, a lot of fan art. Be that gender bent, straight, nudes, what have you. And she does a lot of that. And some of the pros for fan art is that they get to see, their favourite characters in situations they might not otherwise see, in styles they might not otherwise see, different takes on characters, sort of like medieval versions of Transformers, where it's sort of like they look like giant knights and stuff. Sometimes people with fan art will do things that, you can't get from the official source. Okay, fair enough. The downsides to fan art are that, there are a few. So, in terms of legality, in my mind, yes, it is illegal. So some people cite fair use. Now, fair use, also known as... what's the other name for it in... Here we go. Fair dealing, fair practice, fair use. There we go. Those are the three common names for it. Fair use is mainly American, as I understand it, and fair dealing is mainly UK British, as I understand it. So, it is a defense. It's not a right, it's not a preventative measure, and it's not a protection. So what that means is that by the time you are invoking fair use, likelihood is you are already in court being sued, you've already incurred costs, and because, again, precedent doesn't seem to exist, it would be a matter of who the judge was on the day, pretty much. Now, there are a couple of things that people might say, well, hang on, because the United States Court of Appeals of the Ninth Circuit did rule that copyright holders must consider fair use prior to taking action against someone, and that was back in, I've got it on screen here, September 2015. Now, the difficulty with that is that considering fair use before taking someone to court, that's very hard to prove or disprove. That's hard to substantiate, And not only that, but what is a consideration, really? Well, we thought about it, and then we decided to take them to court anyway. I just don't see much there. But fair use, let's look at what it actually covers and see if it may help you or not. I'm just going to scroll this down a bit because I've got some text here, basically. So, the first one is non-commercial research and private study. For an artist, private study would be, like I was saying at the start of this, trying to replicate it, maybe in another artist's style, maybe in your own style, just to, work different artistic muscles, try something that you wouldn't usually do, see what works and doesn't work for you, that would be fine. Text and data mining for non-commercial research, well, you can't really data mine an image, it's criticism, review, and reporting current events, so that would be, if you wanted to do a review of a film, TV show, etc., it's how the nightly news can go out, so on and so forth. Teaching, so this is specifically in schools for non-commercial purposes, so that's not going to apply to the majority of us. Helping disabled people, so this would be, say, creating a Braille version of a book that's otherwise unavailable in Braille, but you would not be able to make a profit on it, you would only be able to cover costs at most. Time shifting, so this is mostly a thing on the past now that everything is on demand, but it's like when, your favourite TV show used to come on at 4, but you only finished school at 4, so you'd get your mum to tape it on VHS and you'd watch it back when you got in. Yeah, Christ, I'm feeling old having to use that as an example. Now, here's the one most people use, so, and we'll get to it in more detail. Parody, caricature, or Porky Pig, not Porky Pig, what's his name? Elmer Fudd? I don't know. Anyway, parody, caricature, or pastiche, which is one we'll get into in more detail in a moment. You also have permitted use of orphan works, and again, we'll we'll get into those. So, obviously, a lot of people go for, well, fair use, it's parody, it's transformative. Transformative in particular is a problematic one that we'll look at. So, parody is supposed to be a distorted imitation of an original work for the purpose of commenting on it. Okay? So, what can we say about this? It's one of those things where you have to be making a comment, you have to be, saying something about the original. Parody is typically comedic. It's also proving, not only displaying the tropes of something else, but proving that you can do it better. That's parody. Now, if we look at something like the, I'm sure you've seen them at every convention, the goddamn paint splatter Photoshop filter pieces of shit that basically you take an official piece of concept art or something like that, you put a paint splatter filter on it and you sell it for money. Yeah, I see too many of those stalls around conventions, and I really wish organisers would do more to try and cut those people off at the point of entry. But again, a different topic for a different time. That's just cheap bootlegging. That's not... There's no commentary there. It's someone trying to turn a quick buck. That's certainly not parody. So the next one is caricature. So caricature, we're looking at a representation or image that exaggerates some bodies or some things' characteristics for humorous or satirical purposes. So, again, your standard Batman fan art isn't going to come under caricature because while it may be exaggerated, it's highly unlikely to be for humorous or satirical purposes. Now, I appreciate there are going to be exceptions, and some of the stuff that people are doing may well fall into some of these categories, and if you want to take that risk, and if you are prepared to fight your battle in court should it come to that, I'm not going to tell you no. You make your decisions, and I'm not gonna judge you, I'm not gonna come down on you. That's not what this is about. This is about, at the very least, trying to make sure people are as informed as they can be. What I am gonna do is I'm gonna put a lot of links for further reading in the description, so that actually, instead of just hearing my interpretation and my understanding, because again, I'm not a law professional or anything like that, I'm just another independent artist, most likely like you, trying to wrap my head around this shit. And I fully admit, I could be completely wrong. So, last of all, we have the pastiche. So that's defined as an artistic work in a style that imitates that of another work, artist, or period. So, this is not drawing Sonic the Hedgehog. This is drawing, say, your own character in the style of Sonic the Hedgehog. So, if you wanted to do, say you've got an indie book and you've got your own character out, and actually you really like the Sonic Adventure style with the really thick, chunky outlines and then the odd sort of almost gradient airbrush shading, then yeah, by all means do that, but don't draw Sonic the Hedgehog himself. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense, because what I'm aware of is that I'm rambling a little, but that's the nature of these videos. They're not supposed to be scripted or pre-prepared or anything like that. I would like to draw some of my own characters in the style of artists that I really appreciate. So Marcus Toe, Ed McGuinness, Akira Toriyama. And as long as it's my own characters that I'm putting into their style, that's a-okay. What I couldn't do would try and reverse that and draw their characters, and then sell that because I don't own their characters. I may be oversimplifying it. Now, essentially, what we're looking at is I highly doubt that your steampunk version of, I don't know, let's pick someone, Ichigo from Bleach counts. I highly doubt that counts under any of these. Again, I could be wrong. And even if you do get slapped with one of these, even the consequences could vary. So let's take a look at what could potentially happen. So you've got the simple cease and desist. This is a letter saying, hey, we know what you're doing, cut it out. And that's it. That's as far as it goes. And those are quite common, particularly among fan games. This happens to a lot of Nintendo fan games especially. Another Metroid 2 remake, it happened to that. Pokemon Uranium, it happened to that as well. There's then action, so, saying, no, we're not happy for you to just cut this out. We want compensation, or we want, redress or remedial action to put it right as well. And this is, especially if you're just outright bootlegging, this seems to happen more often than not. Like when you see those t-shirts advertised on eBay that are clearly using official artwork and are clearly unlicensed, that kind of thing. But the example I have is Zoe Berger, a bikini streamer, who was using Zoidberg and referring to her viewers as the Zoidberg Nation. And she was also saying at so many Twitch subscribers she was going to do a topless stream or something along those lines, and she got smacked down by Fox, and I've got the figures here. So here we are. So because she used Zoidberg from Futurama in some of her stuff, Fox stated that it created consumer confusion because users encountering her stuff could assume that Fox sponsors, endorses, or authorizes her use of their IP or the content of her channel, and that was not the case. So they wanted $150,000 per copyright infringed. They wanted all references to Futurama to be immediately and permanently removed from her YouTube channel and social media accounts. And in total, and this different outlets were reporting different figures, but the lowest was 1.2 and the highest was 1.9 million US dollars. And I do not know the outcome of that case, which could mean it's still ongoing, could mean the outcome hasn't been made public, could have been an out-of-court settlement. I honestly have no idea. So other reasons that someone might decide to take you to court, and other ways it could be damaging. If we look at, porn, Rule 34, then, you're looking at a character that potentially could be quote-unquote innocent, and, you take something like Minnie Mouse, it's not intended to be sexualized, and you do sexualize that, then that can change the image of that character in the minds of the people who see that image, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And of course that could be quite damaging for the owners of Minnie Mouse, which is Disney. And that applies to pretty much any character. If you put them in, what's essentially porn, then it's gonna change the views. It sexualizes a character that may not have been sexualized previously. It's different connotations attached. Likewise, if you show characters, drinking, smoking, gambling, all that kind of stuff, then again, those are all negative connotations that the IP holder might not want associated with their character, and it could be damaging to their brand. The other side of the coin is, say for example you go to a convention, someone's got some, Ariel Little Mermaid mugs out, right? So you buy a mug and it breaks after a couple of weeks because the build quality wasn't very good. Just went on a website, ordered some prints on some mugs. May not be to the highest standard, So when their friends go, well, what happened to your Disney mug, or your Ariel mug, or your Little Mermaid mug, they're not talking about the artist that made the unauthorized merchandise. They're not. They're talking about the property that featured on the mug. And you go, oh, well, it broke. Well, that negativity, that wasn't very good then, that doesn't filter back to the artists that made the mug. that filters back to Disney. And the next time they're in a Disney store and they're thinking about buying a new mug, that's going to be on their minds, and they might not buy a mug as a result. I know that sounds really contrived and really far-fetched, but I'm sort of... This is possibly the downside of this being unprepared and unscripted, is that, you know, some of the examples I have to make can be a little... but that's generally the point. And this is... Flying by the seat of my pants is quite fun, though, I must admit. So, let's say that, you know, you make some fan art, you make some money, and, you know, they turn around and say, right, no, we're not happy about this, and they take you to court. So, in those situations, what would be considered in any potential judgment? And that could be anything from, we're letting you go, right the way through to, oh, well, we're going to fine/imprison you for this. So again, because a lot of this doesn't seem to have any sort of precedence or anything like that, it does remain a grey area. Copyright law is not up to date with modern technology, so it doesn't take everything into account. It does need revision and update. I'll be, you know, first to admit that. So they look at the purpose and character of the use. Especially whether it's a commercial use, i.e. making money off it, or a non-profit/educational use, which they're more likely to be lenient about. The nature of the copyrighted work. So, you know, was this ever intended to be used or built upon? So, for example, you know, there may be... If you get something like Halo, for example, with red versus blue, they decided to actually pick it up officially and let it carry on with their blessing and their official licensing, which is great. That's fantastic. That's a brilliant way for someone to respond, saying, hey, you've taken our thing, you've done something completely different with it, but you know what? People love it, so we're going to bring you on board and give you specialist tools and all the rest of it. Not going to happen every time. But the nature of the copyrighted work, I've gone on a little bit of a tangent because that's more about whether the work encourages fan work and encourages derivatives. So, I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. Christ, let me think. No, so I was thinking of, for a second there, like, RPG Maker is made for making games, so making a game in RPG Maker is not going to land you in any trouble, but then you do have a license to commercially use that engine and those assets by buying the engine, so that doesn't really count. Oh, that's a hard one to think of, actually. I might have to swing back round later in the video to that. But essentially, like... does it encourage people to take it and do their own thing with it? So, the amount and sustainability of the portion used in related to the copyrighted work as a whole. So this is mostly, as I understand it, for reviews and things like that. So, if someone put a review out which showed every single page of a comic, then actually you could argue that that is... essentially pirating the comic, because people can access the whole thing. There's no point in going and getting the original. Whereas if you've got a review of a comic and it only uses shots of, you know, panels or pages that are relevant to the point the reviewer is making at that given time, then, yeah, that's probably going to be fine. The effect of the use upon the potential market or value of the copyrighted work. So this is what I was saying earlier with the mug analogy that went on for far too long. So let's talk about some other things that can come up. So I'm aware that there are a lot of arguments in both the for and against camp. So supported fan art and implied consent is a big one. So when... implied consent is essentially, there's two versions of it. Version 1 is when, you know, you do a sketch of a character, and you actually have it up for sale as a print, and the IP owner comes along and says, hey, that's really cool, we really like this. So actually they're aware of it, They've not defended the infringement. If anything, they've encouraged it. So if someone else then came along and say it was Wolverine, I don't know who owns Wolverine. Somewhere in Marvel, which is now Disney, obviously. But like, if there is an individual who has the rights or anything like that, so you do a Wolverine, and the official artist for Wolverine says, "That's really cool. I really like this print. Hey, people, go buy this print." Then that is implied consent. They've said, I'm aware of this and I'm okay with it. So if someone else then does a Wolverine print and they go, "Oh, actually, we want to come after you," they could say, "Well, it's okay for that guy, so why not me?" So there's that. There is... There was a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game where the official Sonic the Hedgehog YouTube channel commented on it, and it was something like, "Hang on a moment, just filing a cease and desist. Oh, only joking, great work, we want to see more." So again, that would be implied consent, because it's saying, "Oh, we're aware of this. Actually, that's pretty cool, carry on as you were." So if someone else were to then start making a Sonic fan game and they turned around and said, "Oh, actually, no," then, they could turn around and say, "Well, 2 months ago you were telling this guy yes, so why is it no for me?" And again, I don't think we've had much of a situation where that's really gone to the extreme where someone's ended up in court. We have seen the other extreme. So, for example, I am currently reading Dragon Ball Super, which is a continuation of the Dragon Ball manga, and it features a new artist by the name of Toyotaro, which I'm probably mispronouncing. Anyway, the original author of the original manga, Toriyama, gave him his blessing and sort of took him on as a protege/apprentice. And that was after Toyotaro did his own fan manga, which I believe was Dragon Ball AF. So they saw that he was selling it as a fan comic or doujin or whatever it's called, and actually instead of slapping him with various, court action or cease and desist or anything like that, they actually hired him and said, "Right, how about you become the new artist for Dragon Ball," which is really freaking cool. But just bear in mind, not everyone's gonna be that okay with it. So, one other area that I see people defend, and this, I think, comes back to, people saying, "Oh, well, it's really cool. I get stuff that I wouldn't otherwise get," is mashups. So, X meets Y. So let me think. Final Fantasy VIII, but in the Naruto universe. Squall's a ninja now. He wants to be Hokage or something. I do not keep up with kids. I do not know what's cool or in. And I think that's evident by the example I just used. But, I think mashups generally get left alone, not because of an exemption, but because there are arguments between the companies that do own the IPs as to who gets to go after you for the infringement. So, in that case, it'd be like, well, does Square Enix get to go after you for the Final Fantasy bit? Or does Shonen Jump get to go after you for the Naruto bit? Or do they both get to go after you? And actually, how would they split that up? Who's been infringed more? Where's the main focus? That kind of thing. I think sometimes it's, okay, let's be real. In most cases with fan art, the reason we don't get prosecuted is because we're not making enough out of it in the first place for it to be worth their time and money to pursue us. By the time they've, paid their internal lawyers and taken us through the courts and paid all of those costs and fees, it's not, it's just not worth the time. We're small change. They don't care a lot of the time about the 50 quid you might have made off of a Squall print. And hang on a second. I was just bringing up the Sakimi-chan one because I was looking to see actually how much it was at, because the last time I looked, I did have an old figure here of, because thinking about small change, $28,251 per image, which is insane. And I was just looking to see what it was at now. She does have 4,525 patrons, but there is no longer a figure on here as to how much she gets overall. So that, don't know if that's been hidden or what, but god damn, it's still a lot of money. So someone like that might be worth going after. But most people, it is small change. They don't care. So it's sort of this low risk, high reward environment. Like, I get it. I understand it fully. The likelihood of comeback is next to nothing. And, there's money to be made, essentially. So I fully understand why. I can't do it myself anymore. I didn't feel right continuing to do that myself, so I stopped. And again, that's a decision for me, not necessarily the right decision for you. But it's sort of like, if the speed limit on a road is 30 and everyone else is doing 40, so you do 40 to quote-unquote keep up with the traffic, and you get pulled over for it, and you're like, well, why didn't you pull everyone else over? I don't see it as a valid excuse. It's, you knew you were breaking the law, you just saw everyone else breaking the law too and getting away with it and thought, well, if no one's enforcing it, I don't think that's the right approach, in my personal opinion. It's sort of like, it goes back to the parental phrase, and it's maybe because I'm a parent, and technically I'm recording this, although it's a Monday musing, I'm recording it on a Sunday to make sure that it's actually up and live for Monday, because I think it's going to be a long day at work tomorrow. So I'm recording this on Father's Day, so that might be why the parental part of my brain is in overdrive, but, if all of your friends were jumping off a cliff, yeah, I feel old. But that's the way I see it, personally. And I also think, there is a right way to go about it. So you look at someone like Sonia Leong. She's worked in an official capacity with the Assassin's Creed franchise, making variant covers for them. There is a make of car that she is the official artist for, and she's gonna kill me for getting this wrong. I'm thinking it's Toyota. I'm not entirely sure that it is Toyota. Sonia, I apologize. But, and she's gone through the right channels. So, when you see official merchandise and things like that in stores, very rarely is it directly from the company that owns the IP. In most cases, someone has put together a business case, applied through the proper channels for an official merchandising license, and then, once they've paid the license fee, produce their product. And while that system exists, I think it's utterly... I was going to say rude, and actually, yeah, rude is the right word. I think it's really rude not to follow that and to just make your own thing anyway without at least inquiring. I think as well, if you do go down that route and you get told no, just accept the no. Don't go ahead and do it anyway. And I know some people have, gotten job offers and things like that through fan art. I'm not saying don't make fan art. Absolutely, I make fan art for Christ's sake, but selling fan art is a whole different ballgame, and if you want to take that risk, I think you need to know exactly what that risk is so that you can make an informed decision that is right for you as an individual. For me as an individual, that decision was that I will not sell fan art anymore. However, oddly enough, I do feel comfortable taking commissions because those are one-off pieces. So if someone says, can you draw Captain America for me? As a one-off commission, I will draw Captain America for them for money. I won't make a print of Captain America for money. I won't make anything that can be mass-produced or reproduced easily for money. But a one-off commission? Absolutely. In my mind, that's more about the time and skill for a unique piece of artwork that will not be replicated. So, And even most conventions seem to take that same stance. Like, the ones that do ban fan art, like MCM, still turn around and say, oh, but commissions are fine. So, I don't know, I guess I'm sort of following that. At any rate, at this point I'm rambling. I think I've made my point as well as I can make it while I'm talking off the cuff like this. I don't know, I don't know if it's the best argument I've ever made. It's one of these weird things where I'm very self-conscious, particularly in this video, because I know it is the pitchforks topic, and I really don't want it to go that way. So, let's have a discussion. I understand the arguments for and against. I'm not judging people either way. I'm just saying, if it's something you want to do, then please read up on it, please research it, and please, when you make your decision one way or the other, at least you can be confident and comfortable in the decision that you have made. At any rate, like I say, I'll drop those links down below for that further reading so that you can check it out in your own time. I've been Sam. Thank you very much for watching.